I stared at him in shock, my lips still tingling from the unexpected kiss, as his words hung in the air between us. Stop fighting with me all the time. How had our professional rivalry led to this moment? If you've ever wondered what happens when workplace tension crosses into something more complicated, stay with me. Like and subscribe for more stories that explore those messy, beautiful moments that change everything. The fluorescent lights of the office buzzed overhead as I tried to process what had just happened. David Chen, my boss of 3 years and professional nemesis, had just kissed me in the middle of our heated argument about the Richardson account. 1 minute we were debating marketing strategies, the next his hands were cupping my face and I couldn't even think about it without my cheeks burning. I'm Eliza Winters, 28, Senior Marketing Strategist at Horizon Media. I'd built my reputation on being unflappable, analytical, and fiercely independent. David had hired me himself, impressed by my portfolio and confidence during the interview. You're exactly what this team needs, he'd said then, smiling warmly. That was before we realized how fundamentally different our approaches to everything were. Where I was methodical and data-driven, David was intuitive and risk-taking. I planned, he improvised. I analyzed, he felt. For 3 years, we'd clashed over virtually every major campaign, sometimes spectacularly. The entire office had grown accustomed to our closed-door, strategy sessions that inevitably devolved into passionate disagreements. You can't just kiss me and think that solves anything, I finally managed to say, backing away until my legs hit the conference table. David ran his hand through his dark hair, looking as surprised by his actions as I was. I know. I'm sorry. That was completely inappropriate. Inappropriate doesn't begin to cover it, I said, gathering my scattered presentation materials with trembling hands. I need to go. Eliza, wait. But I was already out the door, practically running to the elevator. I jabbed the button repeatedly, willing the doors to open before David could follow. When they finally did, I collapsed against the back wall, my mind racing. What did this mean for my job? My career? The professional reputation I'd worked so hard to build? That night, I barely slept. I replayed the moment over and over, analyzing it from every angle like one of my marketing campaigns. The worst part wasn't the kiss itself, it was how my body had responded, leaning into him for that brief second before my brain caught up. I'd spent 3 years convincing myself that the intensity between us was purely professional friction. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I arrived at work an hour early, hoping to avoid David. I needed time to compose myself, to decide how to handle this situation professionally. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my office door opened. David stood in the doorway, looking as exhausted as I felt. We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Please, Eliza. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before, vulnerability. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, maintaining as much physical distance as possible. Fine. Talk. David sat down but seemed unable to meet my eyes. First, I want to apologize. What I did was unprofessional and crossed a line. If you want to report me to HR, I'll completely understand. Is that all? I asked, my tone cooler than I intended. No. He finally looked up. I also need to explain why it happened. Because we were fighting again? I supplied. Because I'm in love with you. The words hit me like a physical force. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined, this wasn't one of them. That's not possible. We can barely stand each other. David laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what I told myself too, for years. But the truth is, I've never met anyone who challenges me the way you do. Who makes me think differently, see things from new angles. Who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. That's called being colleagues, I said, though my certainty was wavering. Is it? He leaned forward. Is that why I look forward to our arguments? Why I deliberately take positions I know will rile you up just to see that fire in your eyes? Why I can't stop thinking about you even when we're not at work? I felt dizzy, like the ground beneath me was shifting. This is crazy. You're my boss. I know. It's complicated. But I needed you to understand that yesterday wasn't just some impulsive mistake. It was the truth breaking through after 3 years of pretending. I stood up abruptly, needing space. I can't do this right now. We have the Richardson presentation in 2 hours. Always the professional, David said with a sad smile. We'll table this discussion. But Eliza, we can't go back to how things were. He was right about that, at least. Something fundamental had changed between us, and I wasn't sure if it could be fixed, or if I even wanted it to be. The Richardson presentation was a blur. Somehow, David and I managed to maintain our professional facades, presenting a unified front to the clients. If anyone noticed the tension between us, they didn't comment. We even secured the account, one of the biggest wins for our agency that year. As the clients filed out, congratulating us on our seamless teamwork, I felt a hysterical laugh building in my chest. If only they knew. Drinks to celebrate, suggested Mia, one of our graphic designers. Another time, David said smoothly. Eliza and I need to debrief while everything's fresh. The knowing looks from our colleagues made my cheeks burn. Had they always suspected something between us? Had I been the only one not seeing it? Once we were alone, the professional veneer cracked. We need to figure this out, I said, pacing the conference room. I can't work like this. What do you want to do? David asked quietly. I don't know. I exploded. This isn't fair. I love my job. I've worked so hard to get here. And now? And now what? You're going to leave because I have feelings for you? Because you're my boss and you kissed me? Because this complicates everything. David stood up, his expression pained. I'll transfer you to another department if that's what you want. Or I can speak to the partners about restructuring so I'm not directly supervising you. Or, his voice faltered, I can tender my resignation. The thought of not working with David anymore, of not having our passionate debates and challenging each other, hit me harder than I expected. I don't want any of those options. Then what do you want, Eliza? It was the question I'd been avoiding. What did I want? The safe, predictable career path I'd always envisioned? Or something messier, more complicated, but potentially more fulfilling? I need time, I finally said. This is too much to process all at once. David nodded, respecting my boundaries in a way that made my heart ache. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. The following weeks were some of the most confusing of my life. David kept his distance professionally, being cordial but careful not to push. Our colleagues noticed the change, the lack of our usual spirited debates, the careful way we avoided being alone together, but thankfully didn't pry. At night, I found myself analyzing our 3-year history, seeing it through this new lens. Had I mistaken attraction for antagonism? Had our arguments been a way of connecting, of engaging with each other on the deepest level? And most troubling of all, did I feel the same way he did? The answer came to me during our annual agency retreat, a weekend at a lakeside resort meant to foster team bonding. I'd almost canceled, not ready to spend that much time around David in a social setting, but my professional pride wouldn't let me. During a team-building exercise that required partners, I found myself paired with David. We had to navigate an obstacle course together, one person blindfolded, the other giving directions. When David put the blindfold on, trusting me completely to guide him, something shifted inside me. Left, I called, watching him adjust his course based solely on my voice. Now right, about 3 steps. There's a hurdle coming up. He moved with confidence despite his blindness, never questioning my instructions. When we finished the course, faster than any other team, he removed the blindfold and smiled at me, that genuine smile that had become so rare lately. "We make a good team when we're not fighting," he said softly. "Maybe," I admitted, "or maybe we make a good team because we fight. Because we challenge each other." His eyes widened slightly, understanding the significance of what I was saying. That night, I found him alone on the resort's dock, staring out at the moonlit lake. I sat down beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "I've been thinking," I said, watching the ripples on the water. "Dangerous pastime," he teased gently. "I know." I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about us. About why we fight so much." David turned to look at me, his expression guarded but hopeful. And I think maybe you were right. Maybe it's not just professional friction. Maybe it's because we care so deeply about the work, about doing it right. And maybe—" I hesitated, then forced myself to continue, "maybe it's because we care about each other too." "Eliza," he breathed, my name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "I'm not saying I have all the answers," I hurried on. "There are still 1,000 complications. You're still my boss. It could still affect our careers, the dynamics at work. We could figure it out," David said, his voice steady with conviction. "If that's what you want." "What I want," I said slowly, "is to stop pretending. To stop fighting what's been building between us for 3 years. But I need to know it won't just be about the chase for you. That once we stop fighting, you won't lose interest." David reached for my hand, his touch sending electricity up my arm. "Eliza Winters, I fell in love with your mind first. With the way you see the world, the way you never back down from what you believe in. The fighting was just a bonus." I laughed despite myself. "You're impossible." "And you're incredible," he countered, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know that." Under the stars, with the gentle lapping of the lake beside us, I made a decision. I leaned forward and kissed him, not impulsively in the heat of an argument, but deliberately, with clear intention. When we broke apart, David looked stunned. "What was that for?" "To stop you from fighting with me all the time," I said with a smile. He laughed, pulling me closer. "I don't think that's how it works." "No," I agreed, resting my head on his shoulder. "But it's a start." Returning to work after the retreat meant facing reality. We agreed to speak with HR together, to be transparent about our relationship and find a solution that would protect both our careers. It wasn't easy, there were policy discussions, restructuring talks, and more than a few raised eyebrows from colleagues. In the end, we worked out an arrangement. David would recuse himself from decisions directly affecting my position, promotions, or compensation. Those would be handled by another partner. We would maintain professional boundaries at work, saving our personal relationship for after hours. And the fighting? Well, that continued, but with a different energy. Our debates became more collaborative, each of us pushing the other toward better ideas rather than trying to win. The entire agency benefited from our dynamic, with our campaigns becoming stronger, more innovative. 6 months later, as we worked late on a new pitch, I found myself smiling as David passionately argued against my proposed strategy. "What?" he asked, noticing my expression. "Nothing," I said. "I was just thinking about how some things never change." He crossed the room, pulling me into his arms. "And some things change completely." He kissed me softly. "For the better." I couldn't argue with that, for once. Looking back now, I realized that what seemed like an inappropriate, impulsive moment was actually the beginning of something authentic and meaningful. Sometimes the line between passion and conflict is thinner than we think. Sometimes the person who challenges you most is the one who sees your true potential. And sometimes, a kiss can say what words have failed to express for years: stop fighting what's meant to be. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about those unexpected moments that change everything. Remember, the most meaningful connections often begin in the most surprising ways.